Okay, today's notes is on decimal basics. This should be on page 29 of your notebook. And what are decimals? Or what is a decimal? A decimal point separates a whole number from the parts of the whole. The illustration, or the whole illustration below, equals 1. How much are the shaded sections? So we ask, how many parts are in this whole? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 parts. So each one of these is 1/10. So if each one of those is 1/10, so 4 of them are shaded, so that means 4/10 of those are going to be shaded. Okay? So the decimal is going to separate the whole number and the decimal. Okay? So the 4 is the decimal place, and the 0 is the whole. So there's no whole number, but it's 4/10 of a whole. 4/10 of a whole. Okay? What are the place values? Well, whole number place values, we have hundredths, tens, ones. And after the ones place value, that's when we have our decimals. The decimal point separates the whole numbers from the decimal values. And of course, after the decimal point, we have tenths, we have hundredths, thousandths. And we'll go on, but today we're just going to be talking up until the thousandths place. You notice that in decimal values, or in the decimal place values, tenths were ending with a THS, hundredths were ending in a THS, and thousandths were ending in a THS. Again, decimals are a lot smaller than whole numbers. So decimal value is smaller than whole number, or 1 is a whole. Okay. So how do we read decimals? The first thing you want to say is step 1, say the first part left of the decimal of the number like normal, which is a whole number. So the number left to the decimal is a whole number. In step 2, say and where the decimal is. And then step 3, say the second part of the number like normal, but end with the last or smallest place value. So in the example, you would read 841, just like normal, and then 562, and the 2 ends in the thousandths place. So you would say thousandths. You would end it with thousandths because 2 is the last number or last value in the decimal place value. So that would be thousandths. So 841 and, which is my decimal point, and, okay, 562 thousandths. Okay? So here are some examples. Try some. Number 1. So we would read this as the first part is my whole number before the decimal. So I read it like normal. I'll read it as 1,835 and 21, and the 1 ends in, because the 1 ends in the hundredths place, I would say hundredths. So to write it out, I would write in words 1,000 800 35. Okay. Then where the decimal place, I would put and is my decimal place. 21, and then because the 1 is in my hundredths place, I would say 21 hundredths with a THS on the end. Okay? So it would be, again, 1,835 and 21 hundredths. Number 2, first part I would read before the decimal point is 684. Decimal point means and I look at the number in the last decimal value place, which is in the tenths place. So this would read as 684 and 9/10. This written out would go like this: 684 and that's where my decimal place is. 9/10. Okay? Because the 9 ends in the tenths place. So it ends in tenths. So that's how you read and write decimal values. Or read them. Okay? All right. So how do we write decimals? Okay? Again, you're going to use your place value chart using and as your decimal. Okay? So number 1, if I want to do 1 and 15 hundredths, okay, you notice the and is going to be my decimal point. Okay? 1 is going to be my whole number, and then after the decimal point is my decimal value. So if I have to go back to my chart, well, hundredths is going to be my second place value in my decimal. So going back to my chart here, decimal point, and after the decimal point is tenth hundredths. So that means hundredths is 2 decimal places after the decimal point. So hundredths is 2. So it's just, okay, I know there's a whole number, decimal, a tenths, and a hundredths. So that's going to be my number. And I'm just going to fill in the blanks. So 1, right, decimal, and 15 hundredths. So 15 hundredths. That's my decimal. Okay? The next one reads 3 and 74 hundredths. Okay? So and is my decimal point. So we know we have a whole number 3. Decimal point is the and. 74 hundredths. Okay? So after the decimal point, we have tenths and then hundredths. So that means I have 2 decimal place value. So we would write 3 and decimal 74 hundredths. Okay? Number 3, 832 thousandths. Okay, so 832 thousandths. So I don't see an and in there. So if I don't see an and written, so that means I don't have a whole number to write. If I see an and in my words and writing decimals, that means there's no whole number. So that means it's a 0, okay? In the whole number spot. So that means I have 0 isn't here. There's no and written, so that means there's no whole number value. So then 832 thousandths. Well, after my decimal point, I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. That's 3 decimal places after the decimal is thousandths. So I just put in my number, 832 thousandths. Okay? All right, rounding decimals. How do we round decimals? Rounding decimals is the same as rounding in any other number. It's just as decimals. First thing you want to do is underline the place value that you are rounding. So step 2 is look at the number on the right. If it's 5 or higher, round up. If it's 4 or less, leave it alone. Okay? These notes will continue in part 2 for decimal basics.